My name is Jacob Stoops.
And I'm Jeff Luella.
And you're listening to the Page 2 podcast.
This is our podcast about the people of the SEO industry.
We chronicle the real-life stories, experiences, challenges, and advice from some of the most amazing people in the business. In this episode, we chat with Garrett Mehrguth, founder and CEO of Directive, a search marketing agency for mid-market and enterprise brands. We discuss how he went from college soccer star to Fiverr hustler to SEO. We cover the founding of his business, his advice on how SEOs can begin to speak executive level language, what it's like to scale and run an agency and the pressure of being responsible for so many people, how he works to empower those within his organization, what it's like to have to deliver bad news to an employee, and so much more. In the news, we talk about the acquisition of Distilled by Brain Labs and a really interesting Twitter thread started by Kevin Indig about super annoying public speaking habits. Finally, we have a deep dive into why discoverability, not traffic, keywords, and links, needs to be put on an SEO pedestal. So get your popcorn ready as we tell Garrett's SEO story and have another great roundtable discussion. Hey everybody, this is Jacob Stoops, and we are here with the 40th episode of the Page 2 podcast. Somehow we have we've stumbled our way to 40 episodes, and people still listen to us. And in fact, more and more people are listening to us, which is...
It's time to go to Vegas.
Right, yeah,
for our 40th.
Right, for our 40th. Well, let's wait till our 50th. That'll
okay.
Be the golden episode, if we can make it stumble our way to 10 more episodes. But the voice you heard was my co-host, Mr. Jeff Luella. Jeff, how's it going?
It's going great. It's kind of a rainy day here today, but I like the rain sometimes. So.
Well, Jeff, you could be in Ohio. Literally, our trees have a layer of ice on them right now. So, and 3 days ago it was 70 degrees. So you could be Ohio. Yeah, so Jeff's in Atlanta. He's used to it being very warm, but he's a Philly.
I'm from the Northeast, so I know what that's all about.
Anyways, so enough about us. We do have a very special guest, Mr. Garrett Mehrguth, CEO of Directive. Garrett, how's it going?
Good, Jacob. Glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me. It's going to be a good time.
Yes, we are very, very excited to have you, and I think that we're going to have a really, really good discussion, and we've got a lot of stuff on tap for today. For first-time listeners, we like to kind of explain the podcast, and we're getting a lot of first-time listeners. For those of you that have listened to us before, thank you so much. Our numbers are growing. We love you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all of the nice stuff you guys have been saying on Twitter. Things are growing. But if you're a first-time listener and you're just kind of catching up with the podcast, the best way I can describe it is it's kind of like you're a fly on the wall and you're hearing what SEOs really talk about if they're in a room together, right, alone. And in the second season, we've really kind of focused on three kind of core components. One is just the backgrounds of our people. Nobody really ever gets into SEO intentionally, at least people that have been in the industry for a while. It's rare that people get into it intentionally, and what we really like to dive into are those kind of origin stories, the day-to-day trials and tribulations, the real life things that people go through just in the day-to-day of being an SEO. We find those super interesting. So that's kind of the core of the podcast. Then we talk about the news, whatever the news of the day is. And today we've got news. A little bit of a slow news day, but yesterday, Brain Labs acquired the SEO agency Distilled, so that is definitely worth talking about, and it would be interesting to hear Garrett's perspective as an agency CEO on that type of subject. And then we've got a pretty interesting Twitter thread that got a lot of response yesterday from Kevin Indig around super annoying speaker habits. So we'll dive into that. And then kind of the third leg of the stool is just a deep dive. And today's deep dive is going to be around discoverability. and why you need to put discoverability up on a pedestal instead of just your traditional vanity metrics, traffic, keywords, links, those types of things. So stay tuned. Later in the episode, we will talk about that. So, Garrett, want to dive into your background. So what's your background? Who are you? How did you get into SEO? And how did you found an agency?
Yeah, I mean, so for those who haven't heard, I feel like I've talked about this a little bit on other shows as well, but I was on Fiverr. So I was slinging social media calendars for $5. And I kind of just figured out how the Fiverr algorithm worked, and I kind of made a game out of it. And next thing you know, I was one of the top rated people in marketing on Fiverr. And I thought, hey, that was kind of cool. I was also working event staff. I was captain of my soccer team. I was getting my master's in a year. I had 2 other jobs. I was an independent contractor for 2 other guys. I was kind of working 6 jobs at the time, plus, captain of soccer team, doing my master's, all that. And I kind of just, someone asked me if I knew how to rank a website, and I was just like, no, but I could probably figure it out. So I just went on Moz. I read everything they had written in 2 weeks from the prior 5 years. And then I just kind of took notes on everything and then applied it to a website, came up with a little motto called Learn, Engage, Create. So every day I was just learning new things, engaging with it, and creating more value for myself and my customers. And fast forward about, I think 14 months, and we had landed Allstate. And then from there we just grew.
Sounds like you were pretty busy. How are you still standing?
I enjoy this stuff. This year I think I'm speaking at over 30 conferences all across the globe. So I like to work hard. I enjoy that part of this role. Man, it's a great time. I really enjoy it.
What made you get on Fiverr to begin with? That's a different background than those we've had before.
I don't know. I think maybe I never thought I was above anything. In college in the summer, I'd clean toilets and crap, whatever would pay the bills, so for me, Fiverr, when I was starting Directive, I didn't have any money. I had $20 in the bank account. I didn't fund this thing with capital or parents, or my parents were missionaries. So it wasn't that. I was just, I used Fiverr to do a logo for some of my side gigs, because I only had $5. And so I figured, hell, I could probably figure this out for myself. And I made a game out of it. I want to see if I could make $1,000 a month working less than an hour a day or something, and I was just playing around with it.
Yeah, that's funny. So actually we used Fiverr as well to have someone design our logo for the podcast. So it actually turned out to work out pretty well for the price and the level of effort, and honestly didn't have to give a whole lot of direction, and the designer spit out a really, really good logo. Now, I will say I had to go through one designer that didn't work out before I ultimately found the one that did, but
you can do that for $100,000 too, though.
Well, yeah, exactly. I feel like I heard Ohio State, the Ohio State University 5 years ago paid something I don't know, $500,000 to an agency who all they did in the end to update the logo was add a little black line around it. And I was like,
very important black line.
Right. It's very, very important.
Well, it's funny now too with the whole Doritos campaign where they don't have a logo. I think the whole Super Bowl commercial was about not having a logo. People understand that a blue and red bag is Doritos, but they just kept on talking about we don't need a logo. We don't need a logo. And I'm like, well, I guess you don't. Everything is triangular, and we get it.
That's awesome. No, that's so true.
So when you were making the switch from Fiverr into Directive, what is I guess what was the reasoning behind hey, I'm going to go start an agency, and how have you grown it?
Yeah, so my whole life I just tried to keep things really simple, I guess, when it comes to growth and why. So I always figured perception is reality. So growing up, I was I was gifted at soccer. I got to play like number one team in the country. Like this was what I did. And so everybody knew me as a soccer player. So I figured if people knew me as a soccer player, I could charge their kids lessons. Like, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? How can I make money on it? Right. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I started, in 8th grade or so, like charging, parents to do privates for their younger kids and teaching them how to play soccer, kind of made a business out of that. And then what's funny is you graduate college. Like I did my degree in econ in 3 years, did my master's my 4th year, but I didn't really have like any real said, like, this is what I want to go do or be. I just knew I liked to like solve business problems and help people grow their businesses. And I figured, okay, so I wanted to go into consulting. So I applied to Boston, Bain, Deloitte, McKinsey, all these places, and they all just denied me. And I got like an auto response because you had to go through their more like web application, like their formal application process. And like my school was Azusa Pacific, and I had to apply literally as other. Like it wasn't even in their chosen. You like apply other, you get an auto response. You're like, they don't tell you that before you give them $45,000 a year at Azusa. And so, at the end of that whole process, I was like, forget these guys. I'll just build my own agency and they'll have to acquire me. That was kind of my mentality. And so I just like was driving around my like 1978 moped, like all around Azusa, handing out flyers to my GoDaddy website. I had no skills. Just like, hey, I'll help you. I'll build you a Yelp page, a Facebook page. I'll help your business. And that's kind of like how people eventually were like, hey, do you know how to do this internet stuff? They saw me as young. They were old. They didn't know the internet. So then I figured, okay, I got to learn this internet stuff. Tried social, tried some other stuff. I found SEO to have kind of the biggest bang for its buck for people. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go get into the highest ROI channel of digital I can find and become, great at it. And so it kind of just cascaded into that. But no, I didn't like work anywhere. Like no one taught me. I literally just like kind of figured it out on my own.
I feel like that's the way a lot of people end up doing it. I have a fairly similar, and I know Jeff's got a similar origin story where honestly, I started out as a graphic designer, and I worked at a company where they needed websites built. And basically I was given a choice, either learn how to build websites or go away. So I learned how to build websites. And then the next problem becomes, why aren't my websites getting traffic? And then that leads me to SEO. And I know Jeff's got a very similar story. How important is that curiosity in the drive in terms of people's individual journeys?
It just depends on what you're trying to build. I mean, and you're going to need a different level of drive for whatever that is. Like when I started Directive, I always wanted to be the biggest agency in the world. I still do. So I never built it to be anything else. Everybody's different. You know what I mean? I don't think there's one better way to build an agency or a better way not to build an agency or whatever that is. So I think you just have to understand what your goals are and then just be real about yourself. Like, a lot of people say they want to be the biggest agency and then just do things that only a boutique agency would do. And then other people,
right,
want to build a boutique agency, but are really good at sales and marketing and accidentally end up building a big agency. And then they hate themselves, right? So you just have to be real with what you want to build. And I don't think there's that's why I don't ever like to talk about revenue. I don't like to talk about that kind of stuff because I never like to do this. It's really easy for our industry to do this, what I call transparency bullshit, where they're act like they just, all they do is go, oh, look at me, I'm so freaking special, and then brag about their numbers in the sake of transparency. It's like something that started in SaaS that agency guys love to do. It's kind of disgusting. I prefer to just help people and, just be real about the problems and talk about what's going on. Because the last thing I want is somebody who has a smaller agency to look at my agency and think they're less of themselves or less successful, because they're not. They're just choosing to build something different. And that's really special to me. I think everybody needs to build what they're passionate about. And we don't need a bunch of big agencies and we don't need a bunch of little ones. We need everyone to build what they're passionate about. So I don't know. I take that stuff kind of serious. And I just hate when people do that in our industry, because I think it's the cheapest version of marketing yourself, and it's disgusting. I don't know.
SEO has a lot of that. There's definitely a lot of that going around. And one of my pet peeves, and I hate when I'm kind of forced into a situation to do it, is when you're working with a client and you're you know the day to day, you know the client, you know what their pain points are, whether or not things are going well in terms of a performance standpoint. That's a separate story. But I think all of us have probably experienced situations where you get undercut, where your client's CMO or their CEO or whoever it may be will send them like a screaming frog report from another agency to try to undercut what you're doing. And it always rubs me the wrong way. And quite frankly, like I don't like, I'm very uncomfortable in situations where I have to do that or have to try to undercut other people's work, because I fully realize that there's a lot of nuance that goes into a partnership like that. And there may be reasons why certain things aren't fixed. So that type of stuff that happens in the market.
Yeah, that's like a little different. I'm just talking about like the people that just like love to do like here's what I learned this year, and here's, my path to 3 million, or, my journey to 10 million. And it's really just a chance to brag. And then at the end of it, they like go transparency, period. It's like, you're not being transparent. You're just bragging. Like, and you're not helping anyone. Like, if you really want to help people, you don't need to disclose. Like, I just think there's this common like misconception where people think that like they don't influence others and they shouldn't be held responsible for how they affect others. And I don't think that's cool. I think as like men and women, we need to actually say like, how as a leader of an organization do I make other people feel? And I actually think that's like something of noble or something valuable to pursue, is asking yourselves, how do you actually empower other people to build the best version of what they're trying to do, not make other people think you're so great, because it's kind of self-serving at that point.
Right. And you know what, now that you mentioned kind of that slant, I came most recently from a startup, and that type of a culture is very pervasive in the startup world, or like you said, SaaS. It's very pervasive. The work, if you're not working 80 or 90 hours a week, you're not hustling. So I think people call it hustle porn, which actually makes sense. It kind of fetishizes the idea of the hustle or the ego.
Right.
Yeah, it's all kind of silly. Yeah. It's not real, like.
And it makes
Gary V's not real. Oh, okay.
I mean, what he's built is real. I mean, yeah. And it's not that you can't go like share everything. Like, I totally think you should be sharing everything, helping people. It's just like, I just don't like to make it about the money, because then it makes people feel less valuable.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Whether we like it or not, that's kind of just how people are.
Yeah. So I've got some, I think, CEO related questions, and we've had several CEOs, and I like to try to ask these types of questions because a lot of times the perspectives that we're getting are from down going up rather than up going down. One of the most common problems that I find that SEOs have is the idea that when you're communicating with a client or with an internal team, sometimes it's hard to use the right language to speak executive speak, to level things up in a way that's going to make sense and that you're going to get buy-in from the executives who you ultimately need to be your internal champions. So from your perspective as somebody that is a CEO and at the executive level, how do you do that? What's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, I mean, so like this is something I talk about all the time, right? You have like the new Python fad, you have all this technical fad. I mean, it comes and goes every year. There's something new, right? Mm-hmm. But the truth is that soft skills are what pay you as a practitioner and as an owner. In other words, like if you really want to make money in SEO, you need to become extremely knowledgeable of all parts of marketing, business, finance, and sales and product. Not SEO. The funniest part is the least valuable thing you know as an SEO is SEO. And that's a really hard concept for people to understand. And so like at Directive, I built what's called the skill pyramid. It's on my YouTube channel. You can check it out. And it talks about all the things I think as a marketer, as a professional, you need to know. And really that goes down to like your foundation and all these other different pieces. My point being here is like most SEOs can't communicate SEO the right way because of their inputs, their educational inputs. In other words, they only read SEO related content, search marketing related content, PPC related content, they haven't taken time to read leadership books. They haven't taken time to read product books. They haven't taken the time to read DevOps books. They haven't taken the time to read CRO. They haven't taken the time to read management, like sales, finance. And so what happens is they don't see how their very, very, very small piece of the marketing, like actual engine, fits into the business as a whole. And see, the more humility you can approach with your craft when communicating upwards, the more empathy and buy-in you get. And so really, to me, the key of because we do a lot of enterprise work here as well. Like, we're not working on small businesses. Like, we're working with Allstate, Betterment, Cisco, Samsung, like Tencent, like large organizations. They don't care about anything. They care about their goals. They care about their marketing objectives. They care about their revenue. And most importantly, they care about themselves. Like, you will never, ever work with someone who cares more about anything other than themselves. Okay. And so everything you have to do has to go through the context of why what you're doing for them matters to them as an individual, to their career, to them. Because what we don't realize is when we get hired as an agency, they put their ass on the line. Like, your point of contact puts their butt on the line to vouch for you. And you need to honor that. You need to align yourself with that. And you need to execute flawlessly towards the reason why they hired you. And when you do that really well, now you have partnerships and long-term contracts, upsells, renewals. You get a raise as an employee, et cetera. But no, I mean, your most important skill in SEO is literally everything else you know, not SEO.
That's funny.
And I always try to make my clients like the stars of their companies. And I could say most of my clients I've been with for a long time now, and seen them go through promotions, seen them getting like their big things. And, though a lot of times it's not directly like they're doing great stuff to begin with, I feel like I'm giving them a lot of that information and ammo to help out. And I totally agree that being a great SEO is more than just knowing SEO. That is a totally true thing. You need to know how to, just speak, right? And communicate and actually connect. And I think the connection is where a lot of people who are just on Twitter or just on, that actually talking to clients, where they really fail at a lot of times. So I think that communication is super important.
The word we use is that rapport building is more important than report building. And it's a really important nuance of retention and client satisfaction.
That's a great motto. So Directive is growing. I mean, I think you've been open, 5 years now, maybe 6-ish?
Yeah, we're going on our 6th year right now.
6 years. Yeah. So, and as you grow, of course, you're adding more. You do more than SEO right now, right? So how do you balance and connect all those different marketing services that you do to make sure that everyone on the team is getting the right amount of focus, or your clients are getting, the focus they need in the certain areas that they're at?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's really difficult. I mean, we obviously aren't perfect at it. There's definitely areas we can improve in there. But one of the biggest parts of doing it really well is really just management team, having directors and leads without any clients that are fully available to support those different deliverables. And then, working to blend those deliverables by making sure the people doing the work and people managing the account are on the call together. So that you still have direct lines of communication while still having separate lines of communication. And learning really how to do that part well. But no, to blend it all, I mean, you also have to make sure you don't get outside of things that work together. Like, like SEO and PPC truly work together. Like, you're literally accomplishing the same thing of positioning a brand to be discovered when you deem there to be valuable intent, whether that's in a paid result or an organic result, right? So those two things work hand in hand. When you start going into programmatic, you start jumping into event marketing, you start doing experiential, you start getting outside of your area. Now it's really easy to get outside your lane of expertise. So like Directive, we've never done anything really outside of search. Like, we don't do web dev, we don't do events, we don't do email. Like, we stay right in that search marketing lane of like SEO, PPC, CRO, analytics, and then sometimes paid social, depending on kind of how that fits in their advertising mix. But most of it's really within search.
Do you ever, because I'm seeing more companies try to expose themselves to building services around kind of all aspects of the consumer journey, kind of soup to nuts. Do you ever feel like you're being kind of forced in that direction, or is that something that you guys?
No, I mean, here's the reality, right? Like the higher up you go, the more like they're wanting a best of breed model. So what I find what'll happen is like a new CMO might come into an organization and they might pull in like a full service agency to get them started, but then they're going to hack those guys at year 1 or year 2, or they'll whittle their contract down to nothing. In other words, like they'll say, look, hey, we want to keep 50 dev hours a month. We like what you're doing on the SEO side, but frankly, the PPC side's not cutting it. We're going to go get a PPC only agency, and then they'll bring Directive in. And then they're like, hey, you guys do SEO, right? And we're like, yeah. And we talk to them about their SEO, and then eventually, we have their PPC and the SEO, and then that full service people just has the dev hours. Happens literally every day. So no, I mean, the larger an organization you work with and the more talented marketer you work with, the more talented you have to be in every deliverable. And it's very difficult to not be crappy at one thing, or so even two.
Kind of like agencies or businesses that do that, maybe spreading themselves thin. Is that what I'm
hearing? They definitely are. I mean, the only way it works for them is if they're at another type of size where they have like only accounts that are so large that they're servicing the same account as if it's separate accounts. In other words, like you're with what would be a good example for you? Like a Samsung, let's say. So Samsung's going to have a consumer electronics division. It's going to have a different consumer this division, a different consumer that division. Then it's going to have an enterprise business division. Now, all of those have separate budgets, separating operating teams, separate marketing units. And then maybe you can service one with email, one with this, but trying to serve one account with all resources in all your different channels is really quite difficult to retain the account. Now you can get your teeth in deeper, which is their logic, right? The more services we give them, the stickier we become. But what I'm finding is that they're just axing out parts of those services, and you're not as sticky as you think you are.
So yeah, I think the pharmaceutical world's that way too, where like I've worked in pharma for a while, and each drug that a pharmaceutical company makes is its own business line, and its own people, own marketing tactics, own rules on how they can market, right? Depending on if it's over the counter or if it's prescription. So, and it is fun trying to navigate some of those, like a Johnson & Johnson, because they have 30,000 different things to go through, and so.
No, totally different buying units. It's difficult to sell into them. It's difficult. Yeah. It's difficult at first to work with them, but it's fun too, right? Because then all of a sudden you get their EU business, you get their EMEA business, you get their APAC business, right? And now you're doing global. So no, it's a cool pursuit, and it's enjoyable for sure.
So I want to ask a couple of more questions before we kind of move on to the news. So as you scale up as the CEO and founder, and you start to bring on headcount, one of the things I like to always ask is, what is that like? Is there a certain amount of pressure that comes along with knowing that these people, you're responsible to them for helping them get paid, giving them a paycheck? And is there any like added pressure that comes with that? And then to even take it a step further, have you ever had to deal with layoffs or firings or anything like that? And if so, like, what is that like as the person on the other end delivering bad news like that?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a vision to be the best, biggest search marketing agency out there. So that's a difficult vision. And the reality is, to accomplish that, you have to be ruthless to that vision and empathetic and loving to the people at the same time. And what I mean by that is you have to say, look, here's where we're going to be. And in all transparency, maybe not everybody's going to be there with us. We want you to be. We're going to empower you. We're going to love on you. We're going to support you. We're going to coach you to get there. But we're not going to not accomplish our vision. And you have to essentially be ruthless to your vision. And unfortunately, what that means is sometimes, especially when you're growing the way we're growing, okay, there's multiple ways. I think there's 2 ways to grow an agency. You grow agencies through volume of accounts or size of accounts, okay? In other words, you grow for how many accounts you have or how big your accounts are. Now, you have to be honest with yourself when you're doing this, because I was trying to grow with both, and it doesn't work. Okay, so what I mean by that is, like, you can't say you want to be the best agency in the world and have lots of accounts. There is an inverse correlation between quantity of accounts and quality of service, period. I don't care how much technology you use, everything else. Now you can say, I want to be the best vendor at a lower price point, and that is completely okay, right? But you need to qualify it, because you truly can't be the best vendor and have the best deliverable and the most accounts. It literally doesn't work. And so, we decided we were going to try to be the best vendor and then charge a premium. And so in doing so, what happens is if you're offering, let's say, a $3,000 a month retainer, and then all of a sudden your minimum or average retainers jump up to almost $10,000 a month, and let's say you do that within a 3-month period, I don't know very many humans that can raise their ability to deliver value from $3,000 to $9,000 to $10,000 in 3 months. So that creates a lot of just misalignment in who your team is and who you're servicing. And that is really difficult. And it requires constant conversations, hiring, and communication, and difficult conversations around, hey, this is a new expectation. Here's what the client expects. Is this something that you're willing to do? It's going to take a lot of hard work. You're going to have to be putting in extra time around learning and education and making sure you're leveling up your skill set. Is that something you're passionate about? And if they're not, then you might have to go a separate way. But there is no reality of the biggest mistake young leaders and new leaders make is they try to make the wrong people the right people instead of making the right people better. It's the biggest mistake leaders make. And it's really hard, because every part of your soul and your heart wants to love on these men and women and help them. Yet simultaneously, what we try to do as young leaders is we try to focus our efforts on our best clients and our time on our struggling people. But you don't put your best clients on your struggling people. So what you really end up doing is spending all your time on the wrong accounts. And so now you're churning the wrong accounts. And then the reality when you get better at this game and you get more experience is you find out that your best people are never as good as you thought, and they need more support than you're giving them. And so you still end up churning your right accounts. You end up losing the wrong people, and you kept some of the wrong accounts, which didn't even help you. And that's the reality of growing an agency that I'm just having to learn myself. And hopefully, it's valuable to someone listening, because I wish I would have heard that 6 years ago.
I think there's things like that. Yeah, you just learn on the job, because I think every company and every business is run a little different and has different, insights and views, and the employees themselves, right? Because it's always just from working on the internal side, like trying to build a team and hire the right people. We actually just working with a new client, and then I looked at some of their history, and they did have some layoffs, but their layoffs were very targeted on the wrong people. And that was kind of I think their quote was like, we're just letting the wrong people off the bus so that we can make room for the right people. And though I didn't think that was as nicely said, because if you're one of those layoffs, you didn't want to be called the wrong person. But at the same time, making sure. I've seen way too many companies where the wrong people are in there, and they've been there for a long time. And at the same time, they're tough to let go, because they are part of your family and they're part of your team. And if they're not putting in the effort to do it, that it's a tough situation.
Right? Yeah. It's not a layoff. That's not what it is. It's a coaching conversation that says, hey, in all transparency, what we hired for you has changed, and that's not your fault. That's not their fault that you decided to triple your rates, right? You hired them to do $3K and now it's $9K. That's not their fault. But the truth is the client pays them, not you. And that's the craziest part that you have to understand. It's they're your employee, but you're not really the one paying them. The client is. And if the client's not getting what they're paying for, the client's not getting what they're paying for. And you got to make sure that you put that customer first. And it's just something every agency has to do if it decides to grow through size of retainer. Because literally, who's capable of servicing a 3K is different than 9, just as much as different than 15, just as much as different than 30. We have clients that pay a lot even more than that. And the people who can service that, it's difficult to find, and not everybody can. And that's all right. You don't need only those people, but at a certain point, you need to make sure everyone can at least service your minimum size account. And if you raise your minimums, right, every year and by a lot, every year there's going to be this thing of not fitting until you get to a certain point. And it doesn't happen all the time. Like when I was on a club soccer team, right? We started at silver, then went to silver elite, then you go to gold, then you go to premier. Now you're the number one team in the country. Once you're the number one team in the country, you're not churning people all the time. New people aren't even coming all the time. There's not that many people that can play on that team. It's just as you're getting through those stages, there is a core group that is like, yeah, baby, I'm ready. This is a challenge I'm up for. And I love this. There's other people that are like, I don't really know if I want to be a pro soccer player. College, I'm not even sure. I kind of want to just party, have a good time. I like soccer. I'm going to probably play intramurals. I don't really want to be training every day. Cool. Yeah. That's totally fine. And a lot of times you think you're helping people by keeping them around, and the truth is you're not. Sometimes you just have the conversation, be like, look, dude, I think you're in-house. In all transparency, I think you need the time to focus on one account, not 5. Let's talk about it, right? And those are real conversations you have to have if you truly actually want to love on your people. Dragging people along with you till it gets to the point where they hate you and they leave a 1-star Glassdoor review because everything about what they liked of the job has changed and all your expectations of them are above their realities. That's when you get yourself in a bad, situation as an organization.
And I would say, I think one of the reasons some organizations struggle with that is because nobody likes change. Change is hard. And not only that, as humans, most people don't like to have tough conversations like that.
It sucks.
Yeah, it does. Of course, it sucks for both people. And nobody wants to be the one that has to have that conversation. Nobody wants to be the one that is the subject of that conversation. So there's definitely, I would say, and in my experience, I've seen at different agencies and different places I've been where there's a certain amount of dragging people along willingly and sometimes unwillingly. And it doesn't benefit the entire team, and it doesn't benefit the long-term culture and vision as well. But it's a hard conversation that needs to be had, but nobody wants to say, hey, I'll go do it. I'll go have that conversation. So to be the one to do that is difficult sometimes.
9 to 5, it's really hard. And I tell people, you got to just do it 9 to 5. And then 5 to 9, you can cry about it. You can be emotional. You can go through that whole process. But 9 to 5, you got to be ruthless to your vision. And 5 to 9, you got to, you get to kind of deal with those issues, and you can reconcile it. And you got to love on your people the whole time. But if you really do care about somebody and love them, you need to also know when you're not helping them anymore. And that's it's just a really hard thing to do, but it is crucial if you're going to be raising your rates and trying to level up your ability to service your clients.
As you grow as a company, I'm finding talent is tough. I think I believe that I saw that you do have a remote workforce. Are you 100% remote, or do you have offices?
We're both. So we're a beautiful mixture. So everyone's remote or in an office, and it's completely their choice. So we don't prescribe how you get to enjoy your work.
Right. Yeah.
So if you want to be in an office 1 day a week, that's totally great. We got a hot desk for you. If you want to be in 4 days a week, we got a permanent desk for you. You want to never be in, totally fine. We have our new director of SEO, Brendan Hufford. I don't know if you guys know him. He's in kind of the content community as a newsletter, I think, and some other stuff he does for the SEO community. But he's 100% remote out of Chicago or Indiana. So, it's not, we literally have even leaders who are managing, tens, to 20s of people, fully remote. So,
as a newly remote employee.
It's a lot easier to just be like, hey, if you want to be the best, you have to hire the best. And you can't be like, also, P.S., you have to work here. That doesn't really work that well when grown men and women have families. They need to put that family first, and I'm pretty serious about that.
So the funny thing is I've become remote, and at Search Discovery, I'm full-time remote, it's amazing. But there are situations, and there are definitely, I don't know how many other marketers experience this, but you're constantly getting barraged with opportunities, whether it be through LinkedIn or whatever. You're constantly being barraged by recruiters with opportunities. And I'm always amazed at the lack or at the reluctance of companies in this era to allow or be open and flexible to remote work. And there seems to be a feeling that the person can't be as effective when they're not necessarily there. And I do agree to some degree that like being present, there's a lot that can occur when you're physically present that is beneficial. But I think people can be really, really effective remote as well. And I have found personally that like for me, not that I want to move on from search discovery anytime soon, but like if I ever did move on, like it's almost a deal breaker, the remote aspect of it, because I've gotten so used to it.
It totally is.
To my family. Yeah.
No, it totally is. And I mean, as CEO, like I struggled with it, the first couple of years just because of my own insecurities. It wasn't like a lot of us as leaders, whether we like to admit it, we like to feel like we have a certain amount of control. And the idea of not, seeing someone makes you feel like you're less in control. And it's something you have to, deal with, recognize, and then eventually just grow up and move on. And, you got to just be like, yeah, I trust my people and I'm going to make sure they can choose what's best for their own lifestyles.
So Jeff, let's go ahead and that was an amazing discussion. Let's go ahead and move into the news. We've got a couple of interesting stories or topics to talk about. So
definitely. And I think it kind of, the first one is kind of all about this discussion here too, and to an extent. Distilled, the SEO company, has been bought by Brain Labs, and they acquired them for their, for the SEO capabilities, and then to be able to add that to the new agency, to grow Brain Labs as a fuller marketing service company. And I think that, Distilled has done a ton of things, with their content delivery network and things like that, their testing tools. I think what we're in my opinion of what I think we're going to see is a lot more of these type of transactions where it's just like, you're not just buying, an SEO company's not buying another SEO company to grow, but you're going to have, and I think we went through it before when non-digital companies would buy digital companies to add a digital arm to their business. But in general, I thought it was a pretty big, at least recently, big news of an SEO company being acquired that I thought was interesting.
Yeah. So, the way it worked, right? So I know Dan Gilbert, Will, I know a little less. I actually spoke with Dan 2 months ago on Zoom. A great guy, really cool guy. So, it makes a lot of sense to me. So everything that's going on there, Dan brings in private equity group, and then he becomes what's known as a platform. Okay, so the way a platform works is you have a certain EBITDA, you have a certain net profit in millions of dollars as an agency. You're going to bring on private equity that's going to say, hey, we're going to try to do 1 acquisition, 2 acquisitions a year, every 2 years, whatever that timetable is. And we're going to try to take your EBITDA from $3 million, where you have a valuation of 8 to 10x on that $3 million, to $15 million, where we can get a 12 to 15x valuation. And for that, we're going to take a 30, 70, 60% equity stake, and then you're going to get to roll that over. And we're going to become a platform. We're going to do some acquisitions. We're going to grow top line and bottom line revenue, and we're going to grow. So that's kind of what they were doing. Now, the cool part for Distilled, right, if you notice, they took their ODN, right, and they spun it off as what's called Search Pilot. And so they were more engaged on the SaaS side of it. And I think a lot of their attention and energy and just passion as founders pivoted from client services to really growing a SaaS business. They saw the multiples, they saw, the average revenue per user, they saw the gross margins that were very different than their services business, which they probably already slightly experienced in Distilled U. Directive, we launched what's called the Directive Institute in January. And it's been really, really special. It's $39 a month. It teaches you SEO, PPC, content, analytics, CRO. It's the first one, honestly, on the market that's not just like SEO education or PPC education, but all of it. And it's all about practical. So it's all your templates, tools, spreadsheets, everything, literally how we service all our clients is in there. And what I think is unique is when you have a product as an owner, it can change your focus and get you excited maybe about something different. And I'm sure, they've been in that game for 15 years, and they kept Search Pilot as their own thing, spun off their services business. Dan gets a big win, gets to cross-sell SEO and PPC, can immediately share portfolios. right? Because the sales portfolio is going to be all SEO, his is all PPC, immediately symbiotic, grows revenue, and everybody wins.
So coming from startups.com, one of the huge aspirational goals of almost every founder is the dream of the exit. And most of who we worked with businesses kind of that ran all the gamut, but a lot of it was SaaS. And I just wonder, like, do you anticipate Will Critchlow just riding off into the sunset, or the other question I would have is, as a CEO of an agency, I don't know, like, how important to you from your perspective would be like a big exit or selling, or is that even something that you would ever consider?
I mean, that to me is a little more private right now.
Oh yeah.
But no, I think for me, like doing acquisitions and growing Directive, I think this is a logical step at a certain point when you have the right operational infrastructure and management team in place. Combining cultures, retaining other people's accounts through a transition, I'm sure is no easy task. I've never done it myself. But no, for me, I definitely am not, my vision isn't to like sell to another agency right now. Mine would be to grow our agency, through our own sales, marketing, acquisitions, and other things. More Dan's route than Will's route right now, if that makes sense.
And it's interesting that you said kind of the merging of cultures. I think both, and Jeff, I can't remember, because Jeff and I have worked together at different agencies for a long time, but there was a time where I worked at an agency, Rosetta, and then eventually, because it was owned by a large holding or a large parent company, Publicis, we were merged with a company that had used to be one of our competitors, Razorfish. And then all of a sudden, like, we go from being competitors to, hey, you're now on the same team. And the merging of different styles and cultures and team structures, as it stood there, definitely over time was challenging for the company and challenging for the individuals involved. Definitely a challenge.
I've been through a bunch of them. I was actually with Razorfish before it became Publicis, got bought by Microsoft, then got bought by Publicis. I went to a company called GSI Commerce. We got bought by eBay. They ripped that apart, and like Fanatics.com came out of it, and all the
that's
services.
The whole Michael Rubin stuff. Yeah.
Yep. So Michael Rubin was a great dude. Like, actually really energetic. I got to work with him a couple times through some projects. And now I see him he's part owner of the 76ers, my favorite team. And seeing him sitting on a bench with like Allen Iverson, and I'm just like, he used to sell sneakers out of his trunk. Like, how did, like, now he's sitting like getting Meek Mill out of prison, doing all this fun stuff like that. And then I went to Rosetta, and then at Rosetta we got bought by Publicis again. So Publicis seems to follow where I go. But and so I went to get out of the big agency world and started going smaller, which is fun. And I expect that eventually I'll be at another company that gets bought out. It's sometimes the money is just way too big to not.
Right, like you have to put your family first, and if there's truly an opportunity that makes sense, a lot of times people just take it.
Yeah,
that was one of the. If you've ever read Rand Fishkin's book Lost and Founder, he had talked about pretty openly how he had been approached. I believe by HubSpot. Yeah. I was trying to remember by HubSpot, and he had a very big acquisition offer that turned down, and many years later. It's one of his biggest regrets that he speaks about in the book. So just definitely an interesting conversation, and we don't often get the opportunity when one of these types of stories breaks to talk to a CEO. So it's like, well, hey, you're running the company. Like, what do you think of this sort of thing? Is this even on your mind? So it was a good opportunity to ask.
No, it's cool for Rand. I mean, for him, it's like one of the things. There's economies of scale as like a SaaS founder to have an exit. Like, it's easier for him. Like, it would have been a lot easier for him to make his new Spark Toro thing bigger and more well funded and just more connected with an exit on your resume, regardless of how strong your resume is in the first place. And that's a lot. It's just it's just a part of the game, whether it's right or not. It just is what it is.
Cool.
Oh, cool. And then the other bit of news, it's not, and again, not necessarily news here, but Kevin Indig had a really fun tweet, and it was basically like, what is something super annoying that most speakers should stop doing at like conferences? And I thought like the responses were great, and I was actually trying to think back to me, like what did I feel that I don't go to a ton of SEO conferences anymore, and not that I just feel like I need a more advanced one, I think, that I go to, because a lot of times I'll go to, I've been to like SES, I've been to SMX, and I just feel like a lot of times I'm not learning. I'd rather actually go to a conference that's totally not in my industry right now, just because I think every speech I'll learn something from. The last time I went to Digital Summit here in Atlanta, and this was my pet peeve of it all, was I went to an SEO. It was talking about like getting better conversions from SEO, and basically it was all about writing title tags. And I was at the end of the day going like, but I'm like, and my company paid for the ticket, of course, but I'm sitting there going, really? I just sat through an hour of someone talking about optimizing title tags, and hey, I'm not going to say maybe I did learn one or two little tricks, but at the same time, I have to know like what the conference is about and who it's guided to, because that one was definitely for beginners. And at the end of the day, I did see a couple of my clients there, and that was interesting too, because we work with a lot of local clients, and they were in there also learning, and I was like, great. Like, I'm glad you're in here learning, like, even though we teach us stuff all the time. But I think like having like too basic of content is one of my pet peeves, but that's also maybe I'm going too basic of conferences when I do go. So, but what are some of the things that you think, and, Garrett, you as a speaker, like I know when I watch my own, every time I speak or even listen to this podcast, when I help edit it, I kind of cringe at things I say all the time. What are some things that maybe you think that you do that you can work on and get better, or that you see other people doing that would make you that speakers should stop doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I had to kind of learn a lot this year. So I have a torn Achilles, so you can kind of see it here. I had walks in September, actually. I retore it at the 10-week mark. So I spoke at, I think, over 10 to 15 events on one leg. So while sitting on a chair. So you have to, I think one of the things like I feel like I was given a gift at is energy, like knowing how to create energy when I communicate. That does not make me lean into that more, because you couldn't use your stage presence through the way you carried your body language. You had to literally do it through the way you carried your voice. But what I try to do every time I speak is bring as much fire, whether that's through the energy or just the tactics themselves being unique and like stuff people haven't thought about. One of the unique parts about Directive is we spent more in 2019 on our PPC than any other agency did for itself. And we ranked better pretty much than any other agency did for themselves. And so I get to talk about search because I still actually do that stuff. And like we make millions of dollars, I guess, from doing it for ourselves. So it actually works, and everybody else says it doesn't. That's my favorite thing in the industry, is like people in the search marketing space saying like SEO doesn't work for agencies, PPC doesn't work for agencies. It actually does. Like, it works for everybody. It's like, that's what I never said about agencies. It's like, no. Like, we're going to help you, man. This stuff's great. It's going to be really expensive. They're like, awesome. Do you do it for yourself? No. Like, like to me, that was like the most backwards thing of agencies, is how the hell do you sell this stuff? Yet you can't do it for yourself. Like, what?
No, I agree.
So like for me, I love this stuff. So I always try to bring like some cool stuff we're seeing. So like one of the tactics is like if you're running a brand awareness campaign, like using a CPC bid on LinkedIn instead of a CPM, you're going to actually get a lower CPM. Like really cool tactics like that, and then all the data to back it up. And so that's kind of, I just deliver tactics and data that people haven't tried or aren't thinking about, and then I have some fun with it.
So in reading Kevin's tweet, there are a lot of interesting responses, and part of me thinks like there are times in the industry where we're too hard on each other, or where we take take opportunities to troll each other. And I think we've certainly been guilty. There were a couple of tweets, maybe like, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or something, where somebody had asked an interview question that was, or had proposed a mock interview question in which they would only hire somebody if they could answer this really obscure algorithm question. And it was incredibly cringeworthy, but at the same time, I feel like we were like, yeah, let's troll that guy. There's a lot of that going on, and there are a lot of people I respect kind of in this thread, because it did get a lot of engagement talking about kind of just things that are interesting idiosyncrasies, like how and when to drink water, or gosh, what was one of the other ones?
The dogs.
Yeah, I just can't go down those if I'm being honest. So if I see like a negative thread, I'm just like, ignore. I don't even do it. I don't
spending like time on like personal intros or turning their deck into like a sales pitch or just shit like that. And part of me is like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But part of me and I don't have a lot of experience as speakers just for many, many reasons, but part of me is like, it takes a hell of a lot of courage for somebody to stand up in front of a lot of people and speak. The only thing I'll say is like, if you're gonna be up there, have something unique to say and bring the data. And if you do that, like none of the other idiosyncrasies really matter to me, because it takes a hell of a lot of courage to be up there and to be talking in front of a lot of people.
And like some people are good and some people aren't. And everybody needs to try it. So we shouldn't discourage them.
Yeah.
It's just like anything. Some people suck at speaking. That is totally okay. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try or that you can't get better. You know what I mean? Like, but, and other people just are like quirky, you know? Like, there are some people that genuinely want to stretch before every speaker and they think that's fun. And so when they speak, they do it. They don't realize they're the only one wanting to stretch when the other guy does it, right? Or the gal does it. Like, it's just, for me, I don't even go down that road because it's like, I don't know. Twitter is just like this cesspool of BS, like every once in a while, where people love to act very much, you know, above like board. And they do this like helpful judgmental thing, which is like, to me, kind of sad. So I always just love on people. I'm just like, man, it's not that easy, you know, like whatever.
No,
like,
cool. I found the thread informative to some extent where, of course, you always have the people who are just, you know, crapping on everybody. But then it was someone who, not that I have aspirations of being like a world tour speaker, but I do want to have like notes on what people are liking and what they don't. And some of them were really pointed. I mean, I think drinking water during it, like I read that one and it was kind of like, I guess some people drink water after every word.
Yeah, I'm going to drink my water.
but other ones, like there were ones where like people were like trying to get the crowd hyped up, like, can you hear me in the back? You know, and they get all trying to get the, you know, people didn't like that. I'm not that type of person, but at the same time, I don't think I hate on any of those. Yeah.
Like some speakers can actually go out there and get people to do that. Or that their audience, where the audience wants to do that. Like everything is just about the nuance of being a speaker. Like for me, that's not my style. I go up there and I just try to deliver the most impactful information as possible in the shortest amount of times with no fluff. Yeah. And, you know, I want people struggling to keep up with notes and like feeling like they couldn't even get all of it, you know, like more so than somebody who's like takes 14 slides to explain one concept, you know, and that's just my style. But everybody's got their own style.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's move on to the third leg of the stool. Discoverability. Why in the industry, I would say like, and I think that this is pervasive, not just with SEOs, but with marketers kind of on the other side of the fence, with clients, with in-house teams, the idea of focusing on vanity metrics like sessions or keywords, rankings, links. Why should discoverability be put on a pedestal above all of those other things? Why is it so important in your guys' opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I've been preaching on this for like 4 years, it feels like now. People are maybe listening by now. I hear people like take some of my concepts and like try to make them their own. So maybe people are paying attention, but I've been trying. I've called it Sheriff SERP. I now call it discoverability. It's just based on what's actually going on. It's just me looking at like the reality of how consumers buy things and saying, we should probably do the thing we're getting hired for, right? So like intrinsically, why was SEO created? SEO was created because brands wanted to show up when people searched for the products or services they sold. That's it. That is the reason why we exist. Now the question is can you get and here's where we got twisted. See, people took it from, hey, I want my brand to show up to I want my website to show up. Now this is a really critical point. And so my biggest belief is that SEO and search marketing is not about your website, it's about your brand. Okay, so brand is greater than website. Now, once you truly believe that, and that becomes part of your ethos, all of your actions must change. So let's just take a real life SERP, right? So we know that any SERP or keyword that's modified with buyer intent in 2020, immediately extinguishes individual websites and focuses on third-party review sites and aggregators. Okay, so what I mean with that is like, take something like top ERP software. If you search that, all 10 results are going to be third-party review sites. Now, the problem is if you're an SEO, the client comes to you and says, hey, we want to rank for ERP software. We know it's a really competitive term. And then you say, okay, we're going to go after it. You will literally not be able to rank for that term, not because you're bad at SEO, but because that's not a reality anymore. The same thing goes with local, right? So anytime you take buying intent, which is the whole point of search marketing, which is positioning a brand when there's buying intent to be discovered. So you take top, best, reviews, or any type of keyword modifier to a primary term that you offer a product or service on. Essentially, what I call the Yelp and the Amazon effect occurs. See, consumers have been taught that if we're going to spend $5 on a breakfast burrito, we sure as heck, and we're going to look at reviews before we spend that $5, or we're going to go on Yelp, and we're going to go find all the best breakfast review places. What do you think they're going to do when they buy a $250,000 software? That they're going to be like, yep, trust you. Sounds good, buddy. Like, no, they're going to go out there and do their research. See, Google understands this. And see, Google's in the business of satisfying search intent, more so than SEOs are, unfortunately. And so what SEOs need to understand is that all you have to do is do your research, understand how a buyer is finding your product, when purchase intent is strongest, and then position yourself on those third-party review sites, whether that's a CPC model, a CPL model, a cost per position model. Your goal is to make brands discoverable and then generate ROI. When you actually change that mindset from my goal is to do internal linking, link building, title tags, metadata, BS, to my goal is to position a brand to be discovered, now all of a sudden you're a rock star.
So what I hear you saying is that SEOs need to, as a function, or not just need to, they can't or shouldn't function as an SEO in this day and age without focusing on just being a good digital marketer and meeting customers where they are, not where they think they should be.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, like I couldn't rank for B2B SEO. So what I did, I just went on Search Engine Journal, wrote a post about what you should think about before hiring someone for B2B SEO. And now I rank number one for B2B SEO. And I'm controlling the narrative around what people should think about for B2B SEO. It's not hard. Like, you just have to be creative.
Yeah. It's funny. I was recently on the SEO SAS podcast, which, by the way, awesome female-led SEO podcast. Highly recommend listening to it. But one of the things I discussed is thinking about content and thinking about what content you want to create, thinking about what content opportunities you have, and the idea of when you're thinking about a content strategy. I kind of see it as kind of a five-phased approach. Discover, which is essentially figuring out, and I like to use analogies. So like, okay, how big is the ocean of things that I'm trying to rank for? And then strategy. Okay, within that ocean, where should I fish? And then, okay, now that I've decided where to fish, how do I create a piece of content that's going to be worthy of ranking where I'm supposed to rank? And one of the critical parts of that point of creation is understanding search intent. And not only that, not just understanding search intent, but actually taking the time to go out and look at the search result. I find it absolutely mind-boggling how many people don't take the time to do that when they're researching, because what we don't have to do is reinvent the wheel. We just have to figure out what Google's rewarding. And in your case, Google wasn't rewarding your site. So you got creative and said, hey, well, they're rewarding search engine land. Let me go write a piece for search engine land. And people just don't seem to do that. And the typical process is more like, hey, maybe I do some research, maybe I don't. Then I go create this piece of content. And then, hey, you SEO, go optimize it. And I'm like, well,
that's the biggest problem, right? Like SEO's job descriptions, they scope themselves into thinking my responsibility is within this CMS.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest mistake SEOs make. And so my whole education is like, brand, dude, brand, gal, like wake up, brand. Like your whole job is to make the company that's paying you discoverable for what they sell, not to make the website rank for what they sell. Mm-hmm. So you got to change your KPIs. You got to change the way you're communicating with management. You have to educate management, and then you have to go out there and actually do that thing. And you can't do that thing if you're only trying to do it with your website. Like you will fail. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just honestly the reality. And unfortunately, literally everyone I talk to in this space is still brainwashed subconsciously. They don't actually think this verbally, but like subconsciously, the way they go about their work is just in the website, only thinking about how do I grow the website? How do I grow the traffic? How do I get more keywords? How do I increase MQLs on the website? Everything's website. And they're missing like 90% of their opportunities because of this subconscious perspective.
Yeah. I think I've gotten a little bit of an eye opener with this podcast, right? It's something different that I'm trying to rank, not a website, right? It's actually the podcast itself. So where can we there's straight up tech or like SEO things you can do, right? Blog posts, try to get into those type of things, but you're also dealing in other markets like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and things like that. And to me, it's a whole new world where it's trying to build with the podcast. We want to make a great podcast, but we also want to build the brand of the podcast. And that's where it's like being discovered, and it's music to my ears right now, because that is the hardest thing that we like, at least I'm finding with, there's a million podcasts out there, right? So how can you be discovered over everyone else?
And when they discover you, what do they find? Like that's the worst part about SEOs. Like a lot of us are like, we try to rank a blog post that we never read. I'm being dead serious. Yeah. Like we try to rank a blog post, we rank it, and the content sucks, so it hurts us, not helps us. Right? Like that's the act. Like you see what I mean? Like it's such a like siloed approach we sometimes take, where it's like I just got to get this to rank, and it's not like but like what if your rank sucks and hurts you? Nobody like thinks like that. You know what I mean? It's just like I got to get this to rank. You know, especially local. Like all they do is spin off like 50,000 crappy location pages. It's like, does that really help you? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that is an exact, almost verbatim conversation I've had with a client recently, where one of the things that we're struggling with is not is that they're ranking for certain pieces of content that have nothing to do with their business. And the conversation in the process of trying to get them to understand, like, this is great, but it's not helping you at all. In fact, probably hurting you. It's harder than you would think in this day and age.
But it can help you, right? Like one cool example, if you think about it, is like, what if you're Airbnb and you're trying to make it around a lifestyle of experiences, right? So you can have like this lifestyle side of it if you're a brand, and then you're using retargeting to then like remarket to those people over time about like so they wanted to see a guide of Belarus, and then you retarget to them about trips to Belarus. Okay, right? That's still, but you would say that's about it, right? And then there's people who are like a plumber and they got posts on like the 15 best breeds of golden retrievers, and you're like, dude, I don't see the connection, right?
Right. Like, there's high funnel, and then there's like out of the universe funnel.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to rein in is, let's get in the universe, right? I get it. Like it has to be at least tangentially related to what you do. Like it can be 2 or 3 steps away, but when you start getting farther than that, like, is that worth the time and the money that you're spending on producing? And like I said, it's a harder conversation than I would think that it would be.
No,
yeah, my wife works for a real estate agent, and their website, I have to have a talk with the owner one day there, but it's because their blog, I just clicked on it because I always love their blog post to have. So their latest one is 10 ways to celebrate Valentine's Day. What does it have to do with selling houses? That's kind of where I left. They're just paying someone to write content for content's sake. Someone sold it to them, and I think they need a little bit of a talking to with some of that stuff. So.
Well, and it's not the content person's fault, but people spend a lot of money. That's a lot of money on the door on shit content that could be better served doing something else, anything else. Yeah. And it's crazy because people think we need content, we need more content, we need a content strategy. And then when the rubber meets the road, there are agencies out there who will come at them and say, here's what it costs for 80 pieces of content without ever asking the question, is this right for you? Do you need that much content? Does it fit with your brand? Is it going to help your discoverability? Is it in the right place? Is the website the right place? Yeah,
and that's
lots of questions. Yeah,
no, exactly.
Cool. So Garrett, want to come to the end. One of the questions we always like to ask people at the end, because this podcast is for people that have been in the industry for a while and just want to hear old industry war stories, so to speak, and people that are brand new to the industry who are just getting in and trying to kind of get their bearings. So the question that we like to ask folks is, imagine that you're speaking to somebody that literally just today's the first day in the SEO industry and they don't know anything. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, be active in the industry, give back, try to contribute, communicate. I think one of the coolest things about what we do is we have a special industry, an industry that does try to help. Yeah, there's some snarky people online, whatever. They're in every industry. But the core group of search is a compassionate group that loves to help people. Cyrus is a great example. He just shared our Institute program today on his Twitter account. He's always been a huge promoter of us. And we never really we did barely know each other. Some guy like that is willing to, use his following to help you is a perfect example. But if you want to be successful in SEO, the most important thing you can do is become great at everything else. Okay. You're going to become good at SEO through doing SEO. Okay. Read on SEO, be passionate about SEO. That's great. But do not confuse the fact that SEO is a very, 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 very small piece of what, frankly, a business needs. And your ability to communicate that very small piece that you're great at through the lens of every other big piece is truly the way you make hundreds of thousands of dollars, whether that's in salary or millions as an agency, is through being able to communicate why what you're doing matters to the things they care about. And you can only do that if you truly are educated and an expert in sales, marketing, business, finance, management, leadership, product, decision-making, DevOps, etc. So take the time to learn that stuff. Take it seriously. And if you become exceptional at all pieces of marketing, business, finance, sales, you will be the best SEO, because the best SEOs are the ones that actually know how to get things done. And the second you start charging for your services, the less things you're able to do. In other words, the bigger the company you work with, you only get to do one thing. So it's not about how much you can do for them. It's figuring out the one thing you can do for them that'll matter and doing that. And so, that's going to be critical for you to make money in this industry and be really successful.
Excellent advice. So Garrett, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Mehrguth, LinkedIn. And yeah, if you're looking to learn SEO or, want to see how we do things, check out the Institute. It's directiveconsulting.com/institute. Yeah.
Yes, and I was checking that out before we came on, and it looks like a really impressive slate of videos that you guys have produced that are probably, I'm going to guarantee that they're incredibly beneficial to those that pay and take in the content. So thank you, Garrett, for coming on. Really appreciate your time. Yeah, it was a great discussion.
Well, thanks, Jacob. No, glad to be here. And beyond videos, there are templates, walkthroughs, literally all the assets and resources we use. So yeah, check it out and appreciate it.
Thanks, and it's reasonably priced, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's meant to be accessible to everyone. So
yeah, no, that's awesome, because I've seen things like that, like $1 million, and you're like, I don't know how I can tell my boss that I need that.
No, it's the keys to the house. It has everything in there for pretty much free. So check it out.
Thank you so much for listening to the Page 2 podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the show or listen to more episodes, visit us at page2podcast.fm. That's page, 2, podcast.fm. Our episodes are also available on a number of other platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Deezer, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, TuneIn, and more. Additionally, you can also listen to our show on our new YouTube channel. If you'd like to become a sponsor or would like to be interviewed, get in touch with us at thepage2podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, happy optimizing.